Good morning, everyone. Thank y'all for being here. I am delighted to welcome you to this Faith Forum. We are talking about congregational care today, and I could not be happier to have this forum to be able to share with you what is, for sure, the deep passion of my heart. I feel very fortunate to be here as the Senior Associate Minister for Congregational Life and Pastoral Care, and to help to, along with some extraordinary church members and my pastoral colleagues, shepherd the care of this congregation. And so I'm excited to have a chance to talk to you about it this morning, and also to welcome four of our church leaders who are doing extraordinary things and leading committees and groups who are doing extraordinary things in care at Covenant. So as we begin, will you join me in a word of prayer? Mighty and merciful God, as we gather this morning, we give you thanks for this community of faith, this gathering of people from so many different walks of life, experiences, family situations, and life experiences. We thank you that in this place we can come together to know one another and to share something of our life journeys with one another. We thank you for the people who offer help and the people who ask for help. We thank you that in this place and through these ministries, we are able to sense something of your care for humankind through our care for one another. So be with us during this time and help us to hear your voice through the voice of your people. In Christ's holy name we pray. Amen. So we have cards and pens, as is our practice in our education programs. If you have a question, just jot it down, and at the end we will be able to go through those. I'll pick them up and go through those and answer the questions. So I'd like to start this morning by giving you just an overview of what congregational care is at Covenant. And so we begin by looking at our current structure of our Congregational Life Committee, which is a committee of session. And you'll hear from Grace Williams, who is our chair this year, who oversees all of this. And I think sometimes when people see this list, they're a little bit surprised by all the things that congregational life oversees. And so we have a committee we have an executive committee, for lack of a better term, that is the elders who serve on congregational life. And then we also have a larger committee that is made up of the leaders of all of these areas of ministry. So in fellowship, we have church-wide events. So many of you remember our August church-wide kickoff potluck, which is 2 years old and has fast become a congregational favorite, a tradition that I think we will continue, a way to get us all together in August and enjoy being together. Christmas crafts, which happened on Wednesday night, which had this room looking quite different than it does right now. There were hundreds of children and their families here. There was frosting and glitter all over the floor. It was a fun night, as it always is, and that's a great way to get folks together and enjoy the community. Under fellowship, we also have men's fellowship, open table, which is our gathering on Wednesday evenings, outdoor ministry, TLC, Travel, Learn, Connect, who also gathered here on Wednesday, and the room also looked different. There was a bingo and all sorts of fun with that group. That's always a fun event. We have pet ministry. We have the third quarter, which is our fellowship gathering for folks roughly between the ages of 50 and 75, though we always say we don't check IDs. Those events are open to anyone who would like to join. And the women's ministry, which is also known as Presbyterian Women, but it includes Presbyterian Women's Circles. It also includes the Women's Retreat and a few gatherings throughout the year. And now under care, we include the Angel Makers and the Covenant Knitters, the group of people who gather to do crafts that are then given out for the benefit of the congregation. One of the great things that Covenant Knitters do is they make the prayer shawls that the pastors and others take to people who are going through difficult times, and that's a tangible reminder of the love of this congregation. Under care, we also have the bereavement committee. You'll hear more about that in just a moment from Pat Visor. They shepherd families through the time of memorial services and funerals and provide incredible care. The Covenant crew is a sort of loose group of folks who have handy people skills and can go out and provide support to people in their homes if they need anything from changing a light bulb to building a ramp and anything in between that. Covenant visitors are church members who go and visit folks who are not able to leave their homes, are at-home members. They go around once a month and just remind folks that they are still connected to this community of faith and still loved. We also, health and that is actually health and wellness. That's our committee that does exactly what you would imagine if that were spelled correctly. Health and wellness, they look at our areas of wellness and health initiatives. They are right now very busy with with the blood drive bus out on the road. The intercessory prayer team receives the prayers that you write down each Sunday on the worship response card, and they pray over those things in the week to come. An interesting thing to say about that is those prayers are confidential. So if I write Catherine Kerr on my worship response card and then say, please pray for my family, blah, 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 what gets shown to the intercessory prayer team is the please pray for my family, not my name. But if I were to write, please pray for Bill Keith, his name would be on there. So I always think it's helpful to clarify that. Those are confidential, but the body of the prayer, if there's a name in there, it does get on there. But we do ask the intercessory prayer team members not to discuss what they read so that people feel comfortable putting the deep prayers of their hearts on there and knowing that they will be held in confidence. We also have prime timers. We'll hear more about that in a moment from Martha. Prime timers is our care and love shown to our folks who are 80 and older. And they do a number of different things. Martha will tell us more about that. We have our new soup ministry, which is such an exciting thing, where we have folks from the congregation make homemade soups. We freeze them, and then we have them to offer to folks when a baby is born, when a family member is ill or has died, or when someone's just going through a tough time. And that's been a really cool thing to be able to have. And then Stephen Ministry, which is a core and central part of our caregiving ministries. And Alan Morrow is going to tell us more about that in just a moment. So on our Congregational Life staff, we have, in addition to me, Serenity has been our pastoral resident for Congregational Life and Care for the past 3 years. She came into that role after being a seminary intern for a year, so she's been with us for 4 years in this role. And as anyone who has had any contact with Serenity knows, she's doing just an extraordinary job, and she has really expanded our ministries and done some beautiful things with the work that we are doing. I wish she could be here with us. She is in worship right now, but you know that she's here with us in spirit. Karen Willis is our parish nurse who's been on board with us for just a few months and already is making an incredible impact. She is out there with the bus, so she couldn't be here either. Laura Borelli is a part of our team as the Director of Membership and Engagement, and Laura, as you know, also does an extraordinary job of congregational care in her work. She touches base with lots of folks and knows a lot about what's going on. Michelle Williamson is our executive assistant who keeps us going, and Shay Watts is our seminary intern this year. So that's been a really exciting thing. A lot of people don't know that Shay is interning in Congregational Life and Care, and they're used to him being where he is right now, leading the contemporary worship team, but he is also doing some great work in Congregational Life this year. So I'm going to take a minute to just share with you what I call the fundamentals of congregational care, how I, as the leader of this area, approach congregational care in a congregation this size. So churches, as you know, are all very different, and many churches, the majority of churches in our country, especially mainline churches, are smaller churches. Covenant is a unique church in that we are over 2,700 members, which makes us a very large church. And so while we all want our care to be the way it is in a small church, where everybody knows everybody and everybody knows what other folks need and what's going on, in a 2,700 member church, that's just not possible. We do the best that we can to function like a small church in terms of care, but we have to recognize that we are a large church and there are lots of different people with lots of different needs. And so there are several fundamentals that I want to go over with you. And the most important one to me is that we seek to respond to expressed versus perceived need. And I explain this to staff and to volunteers as frequently as I can. What this means, basically, is I'm going to pick on Pat for a second. So if Pat is going through a difficult time and people know about it, her friends know about it, she's having a challenge in her life, and her friends come to me and say, Pat is going through this. Pat needs a Stephen minister, and we need to take her some soup, and we need to take her a prayer shawl, and she needs to be on the prayer list. And I will say, thank you so much for letting me know. And I reach out to Pat, and she tells me what's going on. And I say, Pat, how can the church support you? Here are some of the ways we have to support you. And Pat says to me, I don't feel like I need a Stephen minister right now. I've got plenty of food. I don't need that. I don't need any of those things. And I really don't want to be on the prayer list. Thank you. I don't want my name in the bulletin. What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to respond to Pat's expressed need, not her friend's perceived needs. And now her friends are lovely and they care about her and they want her to have the care of the congregation. But what's most important is what Pat expresses as her need. So one of us may think that being on the prayer list is the best way to receive care from the congregation. And that's great. If you or your loved one want to be on the prayer list, yes, we want to put you on the prayer list. But somebody else may not want their name on the prayer list. Somebody may really want a Stephen minister and somebody really may not. And what matters is what the person who is going through the thing asks for. And so we offer the broad range of care opportunities and ministries to folks, but we go on what they say, not on what the community around them thinks they might need. And so sometimes that kind of can upset people because they may say, well, why isn't so-and-so on the prayer list? And there have been times when someone has called the church and said, please put so-and-so on the prayer list in the bulletin. That person doesn't want to be on the prayer list in the bulletin and we won't do it. So I also want you to know that if you're going through something difficult and you don't want your name on the prayer list in the bulletin, I like to tell people, I'm the gatekeeper and I am a bit of a guard dog and I will not let your name be in the bulletin if you do not want it in the bulletin. Now, if you do, I'll be the first one it will go in there. And that's lovely. And the healing prayer list is extraordinary and it's wonderful to let people know when people are in need of healing. But if you don't want it on there, it won't be on there. One of the big fundamentals is how do we stay aware of needs across the congregation? With a congregation this size, again, there are so many folks going through so many things. And the main thing is that we need folks in the congregation to let us know. So just a reminder, it used to be that hospitals would call churches. If someone said they were a member of a church, the hospital would call the church when that person was admitted, and the church would know. But thanks to HIPAA, they cannot do that anymore. So we never get a phone call from a hospital. So we rely on folks writing prayer requests or calling the church or emailing, and it happens all different ways. People call the main church office, people call Michelle, people let a staff member that they know. Ultimately, all of that information filters to me. I oversee that. I sort of quarterback that information. And then we figure out how we're going to respond. So if you or someone you know is in the hospital or has experienced a death in the family, let the church know. We need the congregation to let us know. And then we do what I just said. Then we go out and say, okay, how can we best support you? We seek to provide care as equitably as possible. A person who joined the church last week is just as much a part of this community as a person who was baptized in this church 85 years ago. We do not play favorites. We do not look at the length of your membership. We do not look at your pledge, or we do not look at your committee membership. If you are in this community, you are in this community. You are an important part, and you receive care, and that is vital. So equitable care is extremely important. And now I want to talk just a little bit about pastoral care and congregational care. You may hear these terms and not know exactly what they mean. Pastoral care is the care that the clergy offer to members of the congregation. And so that includes hospital visitation. We have a hospital visitation schedule. And so when we know that someone's in the hospital, every weekday, one of us is assigned to go visit. And so if you're in the hospital over the course of a week, chances are good that you may see each of the pastors and the parishioners. That doesn't always happen depending on your situation. And if you don't want visitors every day, you also have the right to tell us that. If you don't want visitors, we are not going to come busting down your door and say you have to see us. But we do have somebody assigned every weekday to visit. And then the pastor on call visits on weekends. And so the pastor on call is, we have a process where you can call the church office and punch a button and get to a voicemail, and that will go to one of us who's on call for that week. If there is an emergency, a hospitalization or a death particularly, we will respond to that, whoever that is. Ideally, we respond within 15 minutes, half an hour. If you ever call the pastor on call line and you don't get a response, call back. Because sometimes, systems aren't exactly perfect. If you don't hear back, let somebody know, because sometimes we don't get the messages. It's kind of frustrating. But pastoral care is what the ministers provide. We also provide pastoral counseling. Anyone can reach out to any of the pastors if they're going through something and want to talk about it. We provide that, and then through that, that's a huge part of what I do, and through that I help connect folks to resources in the church or in the community if you're going through something challenging. Congregational care is how we as members of the community care for one another. And so what I showed you earlier, that structure, that's congregational care. And so we're going to go into that. Oh, wait. We're not. No, I have one more slide. So accessing care. How do you access care? I covered this mostly, but notify the church in the event of a birth, illness, or death. The pastor on call, I told you about that. Pastoral care and visitation. Confidentiality is of the utmost in pastoral care. Anything shared with a pastor is absolutely confidential, except in the case of a threat to harm oneself or threat to harm others. Like everyone, pastors are mandatory reporters, and so if there is a risk of harm to oneself or others, we have to break that confidentiality. But other than that, we will never violate your confidentiality. And that's an important thing too, because in a community of faith, people are hesitant to share some of their deepest vulnerability. But if you can't bring that vulnerability to church, then we are doing something wrong. And we need to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable sharing what's really going on in their lives with their pastors. And then the prayer lists I've mentioned. The healing prayer list is the one that shows up in the bulletin that we mention in worship. And the intercessory prayer is what I mentioned earlier, that our our intercessory prayer committee, prays over each week. And so now I would like to invite some of our congregational care leadership to come forward. We have Martha Isaacs, who represents Prime Timers, and Alan Morrow, who represents Stephen Ministry, Pat Visor with Bereavement, and Grace Williams, who is the chair of the Congregational Life Committee. And I'm going to ask them some questions. Thank y'all so much for joining me today. I'm so excited. I get to work with y'all pretty regularly, and so I am really excited that folks in the congregation get to hear from you a little bit about what you do and your passion for your ministry, because I know all of you care very, very deeply about the work that you do here at Covenant. And so I'm going to start out by asking you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about the ministry that you're involved with. Martha, would you like to start?
I'm Martha Isaacs, and I work with the Prime Timers Committee, and we reach out to and interact with and hopefully do for these people what they did a lot more often when they were younger. They are 80 years old, all the way up, and we have about 170 on our roster. It's kind of a joke that we have the best committee because we have no monthly meetings. All we do is invite people to come to lunch twice a year and send them birthday cards and Christmas cards and remind them that they still have a very important role to play in Covenant's ministries here in Charlotte and worldwide. So that's what we do.
Thanks, Martha. Pat?
I'm Pat Visor. I've been a member of Covenant since 1963, so I'm old, and I chair the bereavement committee. I think there's some misunderstanding about that. I once mentioned it to somebody that I was working with that group, and they said, "Oh, I couldn't work with dead people." And so we don't. we take care of the families. When we're all going to experience a loss, our parents, a spouse, your best friend. Every one of us is going to feel that grief of losing a loved one. And it means so much to have a warm hug from someone, a phone call, someone to be a shoulder to cry on, a listening ear. I make a lot of phone calls. I have a wonderful team. There are about 20 of us. And anytime there's a memorial service, we meet the family, wait with them, answer any questions while they're getting ready to come upstairs for the service. If you're going to have an internment service in the columbarium, the church provides a fresh floral arrangement, and we go to the blossom shop and pick that up, make sure it's in place so the family doesn't have to worry about that. We take care of the reception. We make sure people get moved in and try to keep the line moving. We had a large one yesterday. We just act as a hostess, act as a listening ear, really, just to answer questions. You're at your most vulnerable point when you've lost your spouse, and then you've got to make major decisions that are expensive. You've got to write an obituary. You've got to decide, do you want to hire a musician? Do you want the choir? Just lots of decisions. It can be very overwhelming. So we talk to them, we listen, we offer advice when they ask for it, and we're just here to be of support. And it's very, very fulfilling to help someone when they need it the most.
Thank you so much, Pat. I get to see firsthand the work of the bereavement committee, and it is extraordinary. Thank you. Alan?
Good morning. I'm Alan Morrow. I'm here representing my fellow Stephen ministers on the Stephen Ministry Leader Team. Stephen ministers really are here to assist our pastors in the front line of their care, caring to the congregation and to the community. We are lay people with about 50 hours of training to help us do exactly that. We really try to bring emotional and spiritual Christian care to the congregation and the community at a time when they're going through difficulties or challenges, as this life that we live has often and many for a lot of us. So we are just a caring, listening, loving, praying group of people that will meet regularly with folks that have requested, in this case. And you heard Catherine talk a lot about confidentiality. Of course, at the very foundation of this is total confidentiality. There is no discussion with anyone other than Catherine about our care receivers or any of that. And so confidentiality is so critically important, and we honor that and respect that because it really enables the interaction that we have and the conversations that we have, and the care receiver to really be able to express what's going on in their lives and what their concerns and fears and challenges are. So that's Stephen Ministry in a nutshell.
Thank you, Alan. Grace?
Good morning. My name is Grace Williams, and I've had the pleasure of serving as the chair of Congregational Life Committee this past year. So I came onto the committee my first year on session as a member of the executive committee, served as vice chair my second year, and then served as chair this year. And it really has been such a gift. I think, as Catherine kind of explained, the structure, the members of session who serve on the committee really provide that kind of connection in the structure, connection to session. We work closely with Catherine and Serenity and the team, making sure that all of those lists of ministries have what they need, and that we're able to communicate back to session, back to the congregation, all of the good work and all of the resources that we provide for our congregation. I think one of my favorite things has really been getting to learn about all of this different care that these folks provide and being able to support the work that happens across the ministries.
Thank you. We have been very grateful to have you shepherding us this year. You've done a beautiful job. And so next, I'm going to ask each of you to think about and share a situation or an experience that you've had as a result of your ministry that has shown you something of God's love and care. Obviously, since we've talked a lot about confidentiality, you don't have to say names, but if you would share with us a time or a situation in which you have sensed God's love and care for you, for somebody else, through your work of congregational care. Shall we go back the other way? Grace, would you like to start?
Happy to start. So there were many, but I think one of my favorites, so the members of session who serve on Congregational Life have traditionally also participated in serving dinner on Wednesday nights. So I have been a very frequent dinner server on Wednesday nights, which the Wednesday night supper experience, like for me as a child in my home church, that was so grounding to be in the middle of the week, to be at church, to feel at home, to see all of these adults in my life who were caring for me. And so the Wednesday night supper has been a very special part of this experience for me. And I think another important piece of that is working with the staff across Covenant. So working with our kitchen staff and being a part of that team and really understanding this. There are so many people across the congregation, across staff, our pastors who really, all come together to provide that care and to provide that home for all ages and stages. And so it's sometimes it's stressful. It's hot back there. A lot of times there are, young parents coming through with their kids and we can't hear what they want. And then there's the gluten-free that comes up and, we got to figure it out. But those moments are ones that I have definitely seen God's love, the love of this congregation, and serving a hot meal and providing that home.
I have been involved in lots of different kinds of ministries and mission work and things, and you're always kind of understanding that you are the hands and feet, that you are out doing God's work, that God has gone before, God's present, and we learn in worship, we learn in our teachings and our experiences here that God is omnipresent. I have never experienced anything quite like Stephen Ministry in all those years of service, where God, it's very apparent that God is present in everything that we do in Stephen Ministry, whether we are praying for our care receivers, whether we are speaking and meeting with them and having conversation. You just wonder sometimes, wow, how did that topic come up? Because it just struck such a live wire, nerve, and the person's response is great. And then the curing. We are the caring element of ministry, but God is the cure. And so as you see your care receiver progressing through the challenges and through the difficulties that they're having, and you see the healing, you see their growth, you see the positivity in their vision as they're going forward, and you realize God is working all the time with these people, with all of us. So his presence is just so very, very apparent in the Stephen Ministry compared to, well, I shouldn't say compared to, because I know at the end of a Habitat project or Avery County or something like that, you look back on your work and you say, wow, we had help. And you know that God's present and his Spirit is alive there. But with Stephen Ministry, it's very, very apparent that God is with us all through that.
I think there have been so many moments that have really impressed me, and I have felt God's love, and I feel like our families that have experienced a loss feel that presence. If you've been to a memorial here with Catherine or Bob, you know they're amazing. They capture the essence of the person being memorialized. I've been so impressed with our young ministers, Mary Kate, Serenity, Nikki. They do a beautiful job, and it just brings me to tears sometimes how loving and caring and how much they comfort the families. I have one particular service, and I won't name a name. It was a long-time member. The family had moved away, but they came back here for the service. It was a large family, lots of children and grandchildren. They all dressed in Carolina blue dresses. The men wore Carolina blue neckties because guess what? Grandpa was a Carolina man. They brought cookies that were made in Chapel Hill, the Tar Heel footprint. They brought his favorite snacks. It was just such a loving tribute. You could tell those children and grandchildren knew that man intimately, knew his likes, his dislikes. They played pranks on each other. I think we laughed more than we cried, but we did both. And it was just such a loving tribute to him to see everybody talk about the memories they had going to the beach together, playing games together. And it was just such a lovely tribute. And it gave me a lot of comfort in losing a friend to know that he will not be forgotten. And I think so many times we are there to help other people, but they help us in return. And I have felt the love so much from this church and from the new people that I've gotten to meet. I'm old, and so a lot of these funerals that I'm doing, I tell Catherine, this one really hurt. This was a close personal friend for 50 years. But I've met new people as well. So I feel like I'm making a difference and helping, and we all need to be needed. And so I would love to have you join me on my committee.
The older I get, the more I understand prime timers. I came at it as a young adult. I was on staff doing Presbyterian Women, and Presbyterian Women kind of coordinated with the prime timer and 90 plus committees to do these lunches. And so I was young, and it was like, go, 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 let's have a program, let's do this, let's do that, let's make it nice. High energy, lots of excitement. And then when I retired, I told Mary Mattiacci, who was the parish nurse at the time, I want to work with prime timers. As a covenant member, not on staff anymore, but they're my people. After years of practicing contemplative meditation and meditative practices and centering prayer, I slowed down, and it was a lot more important for me to be than to do. And that's what Prime Timers is about. It's about being. It's about being the faithful people that built this church and supported it financially and emotionally and with their lives, and grew this church. And now they've been, as we say, age blessed. And they're at a point in their life when the most important thing for them is to come here and see their friends. And we all have church friends that if we didn't get to see them on a regular basis, we would be really, really sad. These people are lucky enough to still be alive and still have friends living, but they are separated because of circumstances about where they live and how healthy they are. And so for them to come and sit at a table with quiet music, We had to learn that. Oh, the first lunch I did, we crank up the volume. Well, they couldn't hear each other, and so all of a sudden, can they turn the music down? Well, yes, we can, so that they can hear. Well, then it became a matter of a menu. Can they eat it? Is it nourishing? Is it not filled with bones? Fried chicken isn't exactly high on our list of menus for lunches. So what did they need to be able to get here? Let's send the van to Sharon Towers. Let's provide transportation to someone who is in their home but calls and says, I need transportation. And we say, okay, and we find someone on the committee who will go and pick them up. If they have a caregiver who brings them, the caregiver is welcome to stay with them for lunch. Not be separate. We have several people who their adult children bring them. We want their adult children to sit at the table and hear their parents visiting with old friends. And so that is the kind of the agenda of a prime timer lunch. Bring them in, set the mood, give them time to have good conversation with their friends. And then the other thing that this particular group really loves is when they came to Covenant and then came to the point where they couldn't come to Covenant regularly, the music. They are used to having good music here. And so it was a joy when Heather Potter came, and when I approached her about, well, will you take some time of our prime timer lunch and, have something musical? She, of course I will. And her first time to do this was a Christmas, and it was pre-pandemic. And we were all at our table, 6 to a table, quiet music. We had had a good lunch, and now it was time, not for a program, not to come and learn, not to come and, see what you know or what you don't know, but just to be with each other and experience Covenant, the church that they love. And so Heather was up here on the stage, and she, we sang a carol. And then she threw the ad out and said, what are your favorite carols? And this is not a shy group. Now they may be kind of a quiet or slower group, but they are not shy when you ask them a question. And, all these carols popped up and we sang them. And then I'll never forget it. I was at a table there was a table here, and there was a gentleman facing the stage. And he raised his hand. And this gentleman was a longtime member of Covenant. He was a very active member in the Presbyterian Church nationally. He was well known in Charlotte. And truthfully, I was a little surprised that he was even at this lunch. And he raised his hand, and she said, well, what is your favorite carol? And he named a carol. And Heather goes, I've never heard that. I've never heard that carol. And he looked at her and he said, well, it's Moravian. And she said, oh, well, that's interesting. And then, without any prompt, this 80-plus-year-old man began to sing in a quiet little voice this Moravian carol. Not the least bit shy, but just sitting there and singing through this carol. And when he finished, it was, you could feel it. You could feel it. He felt safe. He felt home. He felt God's presence. And that's what we celebrate with prime timers. And that's one of the moments, because we have them at every lunch, which we are having Tuesday. And so if you qualify, you're welcome to come and have lunch. But if you would like to be on a really nice committee and work with some of the nicest people in this church, just talk to me.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can someone tell me what time it is? 10:16. Okay. So really quickly, will y'all each share one hope you have for congregational care at Covenant for the next year or so? What would you like to see happen? You can just popcorn it if you have.
Well, I kind of reversed the question. So I, my experience with this congregational care is great joy. I just received so much joy in the ministry. And I know that joy comes from the hope that we all have that's rooted in eternity. And that wonderful hope gives us joy such that no pain, no hurt, no sorrow, no trouble that you might be going through would ever not, you wouldn't be able to experience joy through it. And so I think Stephen Ministry just kind of brings me to that hope that everybody would have that joy and see them through whatever difficulty they're having.
I hope that we can maintain the level of support for our families when they're experiencing grief. I've read that grief is the price you pay for loving someone, and so we're all going to experience it. But I think we do an excellent job at Covenant. I had to do my mother's funeral, not at this church, and did not have a lot of support. So seeing what is done here makes me appreciate all of the congregation, our ministers who are so supportive and helpful. I would just like to see us continue what we're doing.
One of the challenges of working with prime timers is so many things have gone to technology, and we rely on email and we rely on text, and sometimes people don't have a cell phone, or people don't have a computer, or they don't know how to turn it on, or they knew and they forgot. And so sometimes it's hard to get the word out that the luncheon is a certain time. We are so grateful to Michelle Williamson, who designs our invitations. So we send out, we're still using stamps. We are going to keep the U.S. Postal Service in business because this is how we can communicate. And so I don't want the cost of that to make it prohibitive. And if something magical happens and there's a better way to communicate, that we become aware of that. But that's a challenge that, and it's not just prime timers that deals with this. You know, as you get older, you deal with it, society at large, and knowing what's going on when and figuring it out. So that's my hope.
Our committee will always budget for stamps.
So I say sustainable growth, which is, you know, maybe a little bit more of a tactical view. But I mean, if you look at that list, right, there are several things on there that were not there a few years ago. Third quarter and pet ministry and the soup ministry, I think, is our latest addition. So it's incredible to see the growth when someone says, "Hey, I see a need in this area of the congregation. Can I, you know?" And it's run with it, but it's run with it with the right support and with the right approach. That's really important, because if we just had everybody running with things, you know, it wouldn't work out. And it's important that, you know, every single family that walks through the door for a service gets that same experience. And so I'm encouraged and excited about the growth, but I think it also takes many hands and a lot of prayer and dedication on both sides, from the pastoral and the congregational side, to maintain that growth and continue that love. So that's
Well, you
the
just
hope.
teed that up perfectly, Grace, because speaking of growth, you've probably heard that Session has approved a new associate pastor position, associate pastor for Congregational Life. And at 10:30, there's a congregational meeting to vote for that associate pastor nominating committee. This is an extraordinary moment of growth in the life of this congregation as we add an associate pastor position in Congregational Life. And there have been a lot of questions about it because, as I just showed you, Congregational Life covers a whole lot of things and has been the responsibility in my position. What this is this is a shifting of the resident program. So we've had a resident in Congregational Life for 3 years, as I mentioned. And through the envisioning task force process, through the responses that came from the congregation, there has been a real sense of a desire among our congregation to continue to strengthen the ties that bind us within the congregation, but also outside the congregation, and learning how we can expand our connection with our community. And so this new position will oversee all of the fellowship ministries that you saw on the list. So it'll be a fellowship within the congregation with an extra piece of connecting us to congregations in the community. And so what that looks like is making connections with congregations of different ethnicities, potentially congregations of different denominations, and potentially interfaith connections. But how can we as a community, without going to these congregations and saying, hey, come join Covenant, it's not about that. It's how can we expand our connections with folks in Charlotte and maybe, play mahjong together, play golf together, go out to lunch together, to recognize that we can connect. Our connections don't just have to be within the walls of Covenant. So that's very, very exciting. There's a lot to learn in the next year. What I'm excited about, there's a lot to learn about how we differentiate these two positions, and I'm very excited to work with this person. Fellowship and care are going to continue to be connected, but they will be overseen by separate ministers and separate committees. Session still has to figure out what that's going to actually look like. That's the work of next year, but it's very, very exciting. So I hope you'll run over and vote for that AP&C in just a moment. One last thing, and then I'll open it up to questions. We heard a couple of... I messed it up? Okay. You heard a couple of pitches for if you'd like to get involved. There are lots of ways. These are just a few. But all of these groups are open and welcoming to new folks signing up. So if you heard something that sparked something in you, if you feel like you'd like to get more involved in providing care in this congregation, I would love the chance to talk to you about it. Karen Willis also could talk to you about it, our parish nurse. But just send me an email, and we go get coffee and talk about what you're interested in, and I can help you get plugged in. So are there any questions? Did anyone write down any questions that they had? Okay, anonymous person question. No one will know who asked this question. Anybody else write anything down? Bruce, such a good question. Where do folks go in Charlotte for certified professional clinical pastoral care and counseling? So this is one of the things I do a lot. I sit down with church members and talk with them a lot. I do a lot of referrals out for therapists. And for pastoral care and counseling, I usually refer people to someone at Presby Psych, it used to be Presbyterian Samaritan Counseling Center. It was sort of rooted in our presbytery. It has now become more of a standalone, but it still has ties to the Presbyterian Church. It still has pastoral counselors. It also has secular counselors. But if someone wants a pastoral counselor, that's usually a place I refer to. But I cultivate a list of therapists in Charlotte. It's very important to me to have a broad range of therapists because everyone's situation is different. So in the same way that I connect people with Stephen ministers based on a variety of things after talking to them, I like to sit down with someone and hear where they are and what they're looking for, and then give them 2 or 3 names of therapists. Because as we all know, therapy, Stephen ministry, friendship, they're relationships, and the chemistry doesn't always work. And so, I always tell people, if this one doesn't work, try another one, because one therapist does not represent all therapists. That's a great question, Bruce. Thank you. And if you know someone who is looking for guidance in that, please let them know that I'd be happy to meet with them. That's something, all of the pastors do that as well. I know Mary Kate refers folks, Grace, we all do. So, other questions? Thoughts? All right. Anything else y'all want to say? Could you tell how much passion these folks have for their ministries? I mean, It is a gift to work in a congregation like this that cares so deeply for the people within the congregation and the people beyond the congregation. I mean, I just want to remind you all that it is a privilege and a gift, because not every community understands the importance of caring both for the people next to you all the time and for the people you don't know who are out in the community. So thank you all for being a part of this. It is beautiful, it is vitally important, and I'm really grateful for it. Thanks for being here. Now head over and vote.